session means that it's go time. So if there are particular bills that haven't gotten hearings, if we don't have the sort of fiscal implications for them, if we don't have them moving in both of the chambers, they may or may not get over the finish line, and we're starting to get late nights. Yeah. So in the House, we have a midnight rule where we might be, typically right now we gavel in at 3:30 and then we have to be done by midnight. I know in the Senate, they go all night sometimes until the wee hours, and it's hard enough for me to try to focus and stay awake past 10 p.m. So I'm glad that in the House, it just goes till midnight. I think a thing that I've really learned over the last year and change that I've been doing this job is that, you gotta shoot for the moon, and not everything is going to get across the finish line. It would be so different in the minority. So I can get a lot more accomplished in the majority than I would be able to in the minority. I have some friends who are state legislators in Iowa, and to hear them talk about like, oh, if there's one bill I could get across the line, and I just think, oh, I'm really spoiled. So even if it's not my bills or my things, it's still sort of in that same vein and spirit of, we're going to be trying to provide clean drinking water for folks in Southeast Minnesota. We're going to be trying to support the implementation of the READ Act for kids in Minnesota to learn, the science of reading and make sure our kids are attending school. All of those things is like, they don't have to be mine, but they are shared priorities of my party who is in the majority. So it is this, like, there are certain things that I'm really passionate about and that I've worked really hard that are not going to happen this session, but there's always next time, and so the work continues. I think last year was such an historic session, which was, of course, boosted by $17 billion surplus. So we were really able to do a lot of things. Not to mention the previous year, there was a $10 billion surplus, but most of those omnibus bills never made it over the finish line. So it was years of this surplus building up. So we really got to do some incredible things, historic investments in education, housing, environment, these places that I really, really care deeply about. And I think this year, it's not a budget year. We don't have to constitutionally pass anything. So really looking at, well, what did we do last year, and sort of finishing up the work that we started last year, trying to make people's lives more affordable, trying to make the quality of life better in Minnesota for people. And it's not going to be as big and flashy this time around, but I think it's important to finish what we started. And not that it's ever finished, but we're saying we want to implement the READ Act for science, the research-based ways to teach kids to read. And school districts came back to tell us, here's where we're having difficulty implementing that. And so then this time around we can say, okay, well, here's a little bit of money to pay your teachers to get the training, or here's some money to, support purchasing that curriculum and training to make that big transition. So I think things that I'm really proud of this year have a direct line to what we were able to accomplish last year, and envisioning what the next iteration is of that, both this year and for future years, to build on those successes and investments. Well, my project, my bill that I was working really, really hard on is the right to repair. And this is a national movement. A lot of it started in agriculture with farmers and ranchers making huge, like sometimes $1 million investments in equipment, and then having service agreements that they can't fix their own equipment. They have to have a dealership person. They can't even use, like, I have a certain type of car. I don't have to bring it to the dealer for them to fix it. I can go to my local independent female-owned body shop and repair shop here to get it fixed. And that's not the case with these really big companies. And last year we passed an electronic fair repair bill, but it exempted agriculture. And agriculture is where this started. And like Colorado has this kind of the gold standard. I think Oregon just passed a state right to repair act. There's talk about it at the federal level, the FTC and sort of these like anti-monopoly groups. So that was a thing. It's still a very high priority for me. It's not going to happen this session. But hearing from farmers who say, like, I want to be able to repair my own equipment, not to alter it, not to, bypass kind of these safety features or the emissions features, but just to be able to, sometimes it's just, running the black box to figure out, oh, it's just a sensor malfunction. And if you have to wait for the dealership, either you have to get it into the dealer, you have to wait for a representative to come to you, you may miss your entire window for harvest. And that could be your entire year's income. And so I really see this as an equity piece, and we're hearing that from rural people saying, I want to be able to fix my own equipment. And what we're seeing now from these big companies is there's a pairing, like when I pair my Bluetooth headphones to my computer or my phone, there's a parts pairing piece also that you might have the equipment, but if you can't pair them to get them to talk to each other, oh, you have to pay extra for that, or oh, you have to go through the dealership for that. And we're seeing that more and more in other countries. With luxury cars are doing that. If you want to use your heated steering wheel, you have to pay extra. If you want to use the self-driving feature for some of these electric cars, oh, that's a monthly fee that you pay. And we're starting to see that in agriculture. Farmers are not used to that, especially if you invest $500,000 into a piece of equipment. They want to be able to use their equipment. They want to be able to fix their own equipment. And so that's the thing I'll be continuing to work on moving forward. Midway through the session, we're not sure exactly what we'll get across the finish line. And having a bicameral system, things might be moving in the Senate that are stalled in the House or vice versa. There are two pieces of legislation that I'm working on, so I'm deeply familiar with them. One is looking at how we do soil health, so keeping the land on the land, not into the water, making sure that we're sequestering carbon, we're building up the health of the soil so that for generations to come, we can continue to have people farming the land. I'm hopeful that at the end of the session, we will have a group of people looking into what it might look like to have a carbon bank or carbon credit that maybe the state could run. So we know there are private companies doing this, but it really doesn't fit the scale of the problem either for our state's climate goals. What we have seen businesses be really interested in offsetting their carbon emissions. And we have seen issues in the southeastern part of Minnesota, in the karst region, which is the geology underground that makes it very porous. There's nitrate in people's drinking wells. And the Environmental Protection Agency in DC sent us a letter this fall that said, you need to be doing better, Minnesota. There are people who can't drink their groundwater. And that letter was sent to the Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So we are tasked this session with coming up with some real actionable steps. We need to, in the short term, absolutely make sure people can drink their water. And then that longer systemic, how do we keep the soil where it is and keep the water clean? And bonus, we can sequester carbon. So I'm hoping that we might end up with a a group of folks working with the Department of Agriculture to look at, there's a model in Michigan where they pay people to keep their forests. So I would love to see if that's a transferable model, maybe for forestry in the state, but to really look at paying farmers and having farmers be one of the solutions to tackle our climate crisis. And again, there's these multiple benefits with building up soil health, keeping our waters clean. So I'm hoping that that's a thing that we could look into that would really be innovative across the country and put our farmers at the forefront of a solution. I think the other piece of legislation that could really be transformative, the Senate Majority Leader, Erin Murphy, and I, and my predecessor, Todd Lippert, in the summer, between sessions, we talked about, we've had conversations around the state around healthcare. And as I mentioned last session, we made historic investments in a lot of different areas, making things more affordable for Minnesotans. And healthcare is so complicated and continues to get more complicated. And it seems like we as individuals are paying more for our health insurance, and yet we're seeing clinics close, or we're seeing services no longer being offered at some of those clinics. We're seeing incredible consolidation. So we're paying more individually, and the state has put billions of dollars into these private companies. And the question is, for what? If these clinics continue to close, they're not serving Minnesotans. I understand, you have to have the employees, you have to make ends meet. We know that the Northfield Clinic is losing millions of dollars a year. They are in the red. And yet they are a vital community resource. So how do we make sure it's not just the really big entities and sometimes the insurance companies? They're doing fine. And they are set up to have their shareholders do fine, but what about Minnesotans and how are they serving Minnesotans? And so it would be so exciting if we could get a group of people together to have a ridiculous number of conversations across the state to look at what the different needs are, because it should not matter what your zip code is for you to have access to meaningful health care. Because maybe we've really focused on people having access to health insurance, but that doesn't necessarily equate to health care and health outcomes. So I think that could be really a transformational thing we could try to do this session. I think so. I've been in this office just for one term, 2 years, and in some ways that's really hard because it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to go campaign again. And also, what a privilege to get to go campaign again and really check back in with people, the people who sent me to St. Paul, and to knock doors of people who maybe didn't vote for me or who maybe aren't paying attention because they're worried about getting the next meal on the table or, fixing the car repair that needs done. Needs to get done. I think just having those conversations with people outside of we're often very siloed, and so to go to someone's door and have them have a genuine conversation with me, I always learn something. I hope that folks go away learning something, and I think especially in an election year, it's so important that everyone knows that their vote matters. It matters to me personally and professionally, and it matters writ large. I mean, we're going to have school board elections, city council, township, state representatives, presidential election. I mean, it's sort of like those ripples go out and out and out, and I think it's so important that people know their vote matters. I work with 2 people in the House. One person won by 15 votes. And one person won by 30 votes in the largest district, House district in the state of Minnesota. It's larger than 4 other states. He won by 30 votes. People, your votes matter. And so happy to engage. And even if I don't earn your vote, just participate, because if you aren't participating, then the folks who are already rich and powerful get to stay that way. And so I think, especially during a presidential election year, we're going to hear a lot of noise. I hope that I can be accessible to people and people understand that democracy is a team sport and we need as many people participating as possible.